The day my mother introduced me to Daniel, I didn't think much of him. He was just another man in her life, another attempt to fill the void my father had left when he walked out on us 2 years ago. I was 18, a freshman in college, and far too preoccupied with my own life to care about my mother's love life. But Daniel was different. He wasn't like the others. When he shook my hand, his grip was firm but gentle, and he held my gaze just a second too long.
You must be Emily. Your mother's told me so much about you. I've been looking forward to meeting you.
I forced a smile, unsure of what to say. My mother beamed beside him, her arm looped through his.
Isn't he wonderful, Em? He's been such a blessing in my life. I think you'll really like him.
I nodded politely, but inside I was skeptical. I'd heard this before. My mother had dated a handful of men since the divorce, and none of them had lasted. But Daniel, there was something about him that felt different. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Over the next few months, Daniel became a constant presence in our lives. He moved into our house, and suddenly everything felt better. He fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen, mowed the lawn every weekend, and even helped me with my college applications. He was the kind of man who always knew what to do, always knew how to make things right. My mother was happier than I'd seen her in years. She laughed more, smiled more, and seemed to have a newfound energy about her.
Daniel's been so good for us. I really think he's the one, Em.
I nodded, but I didn't say much. I was still adjusting to having him around, still trying to figure out how I felt about him. But I had to admit he was growing on me. He was kind, attentive, and always seemed to know exactly what to say to make me feel better after a long day. It started small, a lingering touch on my shoulder, a hug that lasted just a little too long, a comment about how much I'd grown, how beautiful I'd become. At first I brushed it off. He was my stepfather, after all. He was just being affectionate, right? But then there was the night he came into my room to say goodnight. I was sitting on my bed, scrolling through my phone.
Hey, kiddo, just wanted to check on you. You've seemed a little quiet lately. Everything okay?
Yeah, just stressed about school.
You know you can talk to me about anything, right? I'm here for you.
I know, thanks.
You're so beautiful, Emily. Just like your mother.
I froze, unsure of how to respond. His touch felt wrong. I didn't tell anyone about what happened. Not my mother, not my best friend Sarah, not even my boyfriend Jake. I convinced myself I was overreacting. Daniel was just being affectionate. He was my stepfather. He loved me like a daughter, didn't he? But the doubts lingered, creeping into my thoughts when I least expected them. I found myself watching him more closely, analyzing every word, every touch, every look. And the more I watched, the more I noticed things I hadn't before. The way his eyes lingered on me when he thought I wasn't looking. The way he always seemed to find an excuse to touch me, even if it was just a hand on my shoulder or a brush of his fingers against mine. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel suggested we go out for ice cream.
Just the two of us. I feel like we haven't had much time to bond lately.
I hesitated, but my mother encouraged me to go.
It'll be good for you two to spend some time together. Daniel really cares about you, Em.
So I went. We sat at a small table in the corner of the ice cream parlor, and Daniel asked me about school, my friends, my plans for the future. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving mine, and I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't before.
You're so special, Emily. I hope you know that.
Thanks. That night, I called Sarah and told her about the ice cream date. I don't know, it just felt weird, like he was being too nice, you know.
I don't want to freak you out, but are you sure he's just being a stepfather? I mean, he's not your real dad. Maybe he's into you.
Don't be ridiculous. He's married to my mom. He's just being nice. But Sarah's words stuck with me, gnawing at the back of my mind. Was she right? Was Daniel's behavior more than just fatherly affection? A few weeks later, Sarah came over to study. We were sitting in the living room, our textbook spread out on the coffee table, when Daniel walked in. He smiled at us, but his eyes lingered on me in a way that made my skin crawl.
Hey girls, need anything? Snacks? Drinks?
"We're good, thanks." He nodded and left the room, but not before giving me one last look that sent a shiver down my spine. Sarah noticed it too.
That was weird. The way he was looking at you, it wasn't normal.
I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. The kiss happened on a rainy afternoon. I was sitting on the couch, reading a book, when Daniel sat down beside me. He was closer than usual. I shifted away, but he didn't seem to notice. But his eyes were on me, not the book.
You're so beautiful, Emily.
I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "Daniel, Before I could finish, he leaned in and kissed me. It was quick, just a brush of his lips against mine, but it was enough to send a wave of panic through me. "What are you doing?"
I just wanted to show you how much I care about you.
I didn't tell anyone about the kiss. I couldn't. I was too confused, too scared, but deep down, I knew the truth. Daniel's affection wasn't fatherly, it wasn't innocent, and I had no idea what to do about it. It was a Friday night, and my mother was out of town for a work conference. Daniel had offered to stay home with me, claiming he didn't want me to be alone. I didn't think much of it at the time. He was my stepfather after all. He was supposed to protect me. We ordered pizza and watched a movie, just the two of us. He sat closer to me than usual. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was nothing, but the way he looked at me, the way his eyes lingered on me, made my skin crawl. When the movie ended, I stood up to go to bed. "Good night, Daniel." He stood up too, blocking my path. "Good night, Emily." Then, before I could react, he pulled me into a hug. It was tight, suffocating, and his hands roamed over my back in a way that made my stomach churn. I tried to pull away, but he held me tighter.
You're so beautiful. I've always thought so.
"Daniel, stop!" But he didn't listen. He kissed me, his lips crushing against mine, and I froze, too shocked to move. His hands were everywhere, and before I knew it, he was leading me to his bedroom. I don't remember much after that, just the feeling of his weight on top of me, the sound of his breathing in my ear, and the overwhelming sense of helplessness that washed over me. When it was over, I ran to my room, locked the door, and cried myself to sleep. The next morning, I woke up feeling numb. My body ached, and my mind was a whirlwind of emotions: shame, anger, fear. He acted like nothing had happened. He made breakfast, humming to himself as he flipped pancakes on the stove. Over the next few weeks, I avoided Daniel as much as possible. I stayed late at school, spent weekends at Sarah's house, and locked myself in my room whenever I was home. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the growing suspicion that something was wrong. My period was late. At first, I told myself it was just stress. But as the days turned into weeks, the fear grew. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything. My mother noticed, of course.
Emily, what's wrong?
Nothing. Just stressed about school. But she didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. I finally worked up the courage to take a pregnancy test. I bought it at a drugstore on the other side of town, where no one would recognize me. I waited until my mother and Daniel were out of the house, then locked myself in the bathroom and took the test. The 2 pink lines appeared almost instantly. I stared at them. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. But it was. I was pregnant, and the only person it could be was Daniel. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't tell my mother. I couldn't tell anyone. But the weight of the secret was crushing me. My mother noticed, of course.
Emily, what's wrong?
Nothing. Just stressed about school. But she didn't believe me. She followed me to my room later that night and found the pregnancy test in my trash can.
Emily, is this Is this Daniel's?
I nodded, unable to speak. The look on her face broke my heart. My mother filed for divorce the next day. Daniel tried to deny it, tried to convince her it was a mistake, but she didn't believe him. Get out of my house and don't ever come back. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the pregnancy test in my hand, 2 pink lines. My life was forever changed, and I had no idea what to do next. But one thing was certain. I would never let Daniel, or anyone like him, into my life again.